Hey, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for watching. I want to cover in a format like this today because I injured my knee doing judo pretty bad. If you saw my Instagram, I talked about it there. Basically, I went to go do a turn throw, and it's a different type of floor. It's a gymnastics floor that breaks away. I think I locked my leg out because it broke away, and it also has a lot more friction on it because it's like a carpeted surface. And when my foot stayed in place, my whole body twisted over it, and I basically heel hooked myself. So I don't know how long I'm going to be out, but I get an MRI in a few weeks, and then hopefully it's not that bad, but it feels like it is, that's for sure. So the topic today that I want to cover is whether or not I teach fakes, or some people call them feints, right? So that comes from boxing, the feint thing. And so in MMA, for example, if you watch George St. Pierre, he fakes a shot, people put their hands up, and then that's when he shoots, right? Well, that doesn't translate to straight up grappling at all. Fakes a punch, right? And the guy puts his hands up. Well, now he's left his legs open, and that was the whole point of it. Well, you're not doing that in jiu-jitsu. You're not faking a punch. So people are shooting from distance, and they're just getting themselves into trouble because the guy's hands, he doesn't need to put his hands up to block the punch, right? So you can't translate those things. And I think people are trying to make those transitions and teach those transitions, and they just don't work. So I don't teach my guys to shoot from space. I think it's a really bad idea. If a person has a fundamental solid stance, which is the first thing I work on with all of my guys, a very rock solid stance that I cover on my instructional with Jordan Preisinger that's going to be coming out in a few weeks. I also talk a lot about how to get past the hands. So how to establish hand control inside position with your head and your body, and so I can control all the inside space. Way more effective than trying to shoot from a distance. If you try to shoot from a distance and the guy has a decent, he doesn't even need a sprawl. If you're not doing anything to get past his hands, you're just going to get stuffed, and then he's just going to snap you down and take a front headlock position. And in jiu-jitsu, he might just choke you from there, or I would prefer to just take your back from there. So the feint, where does that come into play? Because people ask me all the time. I don't really teach my guys to do it because they're relying on the other guy reacting to a threat. And if they don't see that threat as a threat, then it's basically they're not going to react the way that you want. And you're relying on them to have a response to your non-threatening threat, if there's a better way of saying it. And so they're idle threats most of the time. And I've covered on my channel watching, and I did some breakdowns watching people do that. And they come way out of their stance. They drop their head. They come, which is just going to give me the front headlock. You're dropping your head, and I'm just going to take the front headlock. And then if I don't, you come way up out of your stance, and have I stayed my stance the whole time, wait for you to come up, back up and out of your stance, and take your legs out from underneath you. And so they frankly don't work very well for people who are entry level wrestlers, which is primarily where jiu-jitsu is right now. Is this like, I teach guys in jiu-jitsu how to wrestle just like I teach high school kids how to wrestle. And that's not an insult, because I teach kids how to wrestle that end up going to wrestle in college and do quite well. I've had a history of doing that and producing state champions. And so there's still a lot to learn in the process of being a state champion in terms of your fundamentals. And so if you have a good stance, all my guys would be taught to have a rock solid stance, let that guy jump around and do his idle threats and waste energy being inefficient in his stance by coming in and out of it, and just give me easy position. So I don't really do a lot of the selling of the feint, even if I do have inside position. My first move is a real threat. If I pull you and try to go to an outside single, that's a real threat. If you give me the leg, I take it. I'm not expecting you to do something and then you do something and then you do something. Like, that real first move is a real first move. And it's in judo, they're teaching me the same thing. I have a sequence of things that I do. And if those things aren't there and they don't work, fine. But if I go for a ko-uchi-gari and it works right away, I don't have to worry about doing the o-uchi afterwards. I don't need to worry about, doing a sisai first, and then when he backs up, going to Osotogari. Like, I'm going to try those things 100%. And if they work, good. And if they don't, I have something else that's in the sequence. But a lot of people are relying on, he has to do this first, and in order for me to do the next thing. And I don't think that's a good way of drilling. I don't think it's a good way of thinking for yourself that that's what you should expect, because a good wrestler in a very good stance is not going to move, and they're going to show you psychologically that they're not afraid of your idle threats. And if they worked so well, then we would see a lot of people in jiu-jitsu scoring off of them, but we don't. And so if you get to really high level wrestling, you see guys doing a lot of feints. And the problem with a lot of people, I think, is that they're watching high level wrestling, or they're watching people who do breakdowns of really high level wrestling, and they think that that's what they should be doing, when you can get really far by doing really good fundamental wrestling. Take what you want and get after it. So my guys were always taught to walk forward and start, and I talk about this all in the instructional, walk forward and start establishing control. If he reaches for me, then he's going to probably give me some easy posts, right? I cover some of this stuff on my channel already, but I cover it in more detail in the instructional. And if they don't do that, well, I'm coming in for my attack, whether you like it or not. And I'm going to get what I want. I'm going to take it from you, and I'm going to start working my systems, right? And I'm not going to wait for, if I bob my head around and I drop my head, then you're supposed to follow me. What if they don't follow you? If they're not good wrestlers, then they don't even know how to follow you. All the stuff that you've been taught, right? And all you're doing is burning unnecessary amounts of energy to get a guy to move who's not threatened by your idle threats. And so that part of jiu-jitsu wrestling, I think, needs to change. I think people need to stop trying to emulate the highest level Jordan Burroughs like wrestling, because you don't need it for most levels of wrestling, and you're not going to get the reactions that you want out of a jiu-jitsu guy. And you're going to get frustrated and shoot from space, and you're going to get stuffed. And so it's best to have a systematic approach of having a series of attacks that you're going to do. I'm really attacking, I'm not feinting. And if that person reacts off of that, then yes, there's something else in the chain. But I hope that addresses some of the questions that I've been getting about feints. And I think that you ought to actually drill real sequences and moves that you want in a system, which if you go to wrestlingforbjj.com, then you can sign up for Jordan's newsletter there. You can sign up to be notified of when the course comes out. And I go through a number of sequences in there to help you, sequences and hand fighting and things like that, to know, so that you know what to look for and what you're supposed to be doing to attack things. Because wrestling is not just about moves. Anybody can show you moves. These moves are thousands and thousands of years old. It's not about moves. It's about systems and about concepts, so that when you understand what it is that you need to make things work, then you can chain things together. Okay. And then some sequences might work better for you than others. But I give you sort of a baseline knowledge of how to do that. And that's how I've been running my channel from the beginning. It's how I've been coaching wrestling for over 20 something years. And what I learned when I was young is it's not about moves. It's about understanding how to control a human being that's resisting you. And you're not going to do it because you know a different move than him, because everybody knows all of these moves. You can get instructionals where people show you 1,000 moves and absolutely zero concepts about how those moves work. And that's the whole goal of the instructional, is to try to give you a system. And I mention in there about I don't like fakes. I just go for it, and I want to have a series of attacks that I'm going to do in order to implement my game. And you're either going to respond or you're not. You're just going to give it to me. And when I have those systems in place, it prevents me from getting frustrated when you're moving, because everything that you do when I have legitimate control is the wrong answer. So for my underhook series, for example, once I establish the control, and I'll show you how to get there in the instructional, once I establish that control, everything you do is the wrong answer. If you have proper head position and you have proper hip position, he's screwed. And it doesn't matter if he's pushing into you or not. Like, a lot of wrestling moves, they have to be pushing into you for them to work. And guys in jiu-jitsu walk backwards all the time. So this underhook system works regardless of somebody stalling. Hopefully they change the rules in jiu-jitsu pretty soon on stalling, because it's getting ridiculous of people just being able to walk out of bounds. It's like the out of bounds doesn't even exist. And so, but if those rule sets change overnight, then all of a sudden you're going to see a lot more classic wrestling work where people have to push back to engage. And now you're going to see, and if they shorten the length of the matches too, you'll see that a lot of the classic wrestling will start working better. And then you'll see that people will have to learn how to do systems, and not just be like, oh, I'm going to rely on me dropping my head and faking, and this guy's going to follow me, which he's not. You shouldn't. Don't follow him. Ignore what he's doing. Doesn't matter. You work your stuff and make it work for you. So I hope this answers those questions. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share the content if you like, if you think it's useful. Ask questions if you want some clarification on things. I'd be happy to answer all of your questions. Until I might be doing this format for a while if my knee needs surgery, which I gather it probably does. And I'll keep you updated on that. And until then, thanks for watching.